Hi, thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to be unboxing and setting up a prosumer level printer that competes with the likes of an Ultimaker with a slightly higher bang for your buck factor. This is the Creatbot DX. So before we get unboxing this, I just want to mention a couple things. This is an extremely heavy, solid printer. I'm going to guess it's just over 100 pounds, and there is a warning here to lift it with 2 people. Luckily, I already have it on this table. But if you don't have 2 people, you could unbox this on the ground, and I'm going to show you kind of my unboxing process if I'm doing this alone. So let's cut the tie straps. If you're doing this with 2 people, you'll just cut the top open and carefully lift it right out the top. In my case, I'm going to cut the box right down the corners and kind of fold it open. So when you're cutting through the outer box, you don't have to worry too much because it's kind of a box within a box. I'll try to just lift this right off the top. There we go. And on the corners, there's these large foam pads, so you're not going to hit the printer with your X-Acto knife. So I'm just going to remove the bottom piece of the cardboard here, and then I'll be able to lift this entire bag off the pad here and onto the table. Now, if you're going to grab it, probably not best to grab it by the bag itself, but when you're reaching inside the printer, make sure you're not grabbing onto any rails. You should just be grabbing onto the steel frame. It's very thin steel frame, and lift. All right, now we can get rid of the garbage. On each side, except the back, we have an acrylic panel that's covered with a protective paper from the factory. We'll remove that in a couple minutes. I'm just gonna try to slide, there we go, the bag off the bottom of the printer. Get rid of that. There we go. All right. Inside the printer, they store all of the accessories and the materials we're going to need to assemble it. We're going to have to carefully remove these bags from inside here. They're saran wrapped to the machine, so using our knife, very carefully cut through the saran wrap, making sure to not nick anything in the packaging in the process. So on top, we have glue stick, tape, and a bag of all of our hardware, nuts and bolts, drivers, spare parts. We'll disassemble that in a few minutes. The next bag is going to be the glass bed, I believe. There we go. Sandwiched carefully between some more foam. So this is the borosilicate heated glass bed. It's got a silicone heater on the bottom, and it has an undercarriage that will bolt to the 2 cantilevered arms for the Z here. And then obviously cabling for the heater and the thermistor. There's also a calibration print, so they do a test print at the factory. This is a circle, diamond, square, and you would be able to measure this for dimensional accuracy. It gives you an idea of the finish that you're able to achieve, and I'm sure that that finish can be even further tuned, but really this is to prove the machine works and that it's dimensionally accurate. Some more saran wrap to the bottom of the machine. Go. And each of these machines come with 2 1-kilo spools of PLA. It tends to be random colors, so we'll see what we get. So we've got yellow, and this is of course 2.85 millimeter filament, not 1.75. We'll talk about why that's a good thing in a few minutes. So we got red and yellow. And here, carefully packaged in the corner, is the extruder assemblies that we will mount to the back of the printer. The printer is obviously a Bowden-style feeder, and the extruders will go onto the back panel. Extruder assemblies are very tightly saran wrapped. Make sure you are very careful when you're cutting through this, because there are some cables in there that we don't want to nick. So you have the extruder motor, a geared gearbox here, and then a hardened steel drive gear. And the filament is just pressed against the drive gear with this lever here that is tension controlled by this nut. As I mentioned, there are wires in this package. So we obviously have a filament runout sensor on each of the extruders, and we would plug in the stepper motor wires into this. So now let's go through what's included in this large package of components. So we have a power cord, we have kind of a masking tape. There's also glue stick. This looks to be a PVA, so a dissolvable support print. It looks like a couple mushrooms. So that's kind of showcasing the dual extruder capabilities of this. Small screws and aluminum handles, so these get mounted onto each of the doors. We have some assembly tools, wrenches, screwdriver, a scraper, and even though we do have wrenches, it will make your life a lot easier to have a very small socket. We'll use this socket for mounting these plates for the extruders to the back of the machine. Otherwise, we'll be sitting there forever with a standard wrench. But you can get away with that for sure. A USB cable, and some spare parts. So we have a spare heater cartridge. We have a couple small pieces of PTFE tubing. This is the PTFE tube that would go inside the hot end assembly. It is a PTFE lined hot end. We have two spool holders. So these, well, they're really just threaded rods, but they act as spool holders on the back of the machine. And some nuts to screw onto the end to stop the spool from sliding off. A Kingston USB stick, and a spare driver. So this is actually a really nice thing to include. So they have a spare stepper stick driver, kind of your standard Pololu format driver. There we go, with a beefy heatsink on that. Not that I expect you to ever blow one, but if you do, you have one in your kit. And there is a assembly manual and some instructions. I'm probably not going to refer to this, but feel free to browse this before we go any further. So because I'm nervous about leaving the glass bed out while we're assembling some heavier parts, we're going to put the glass bed into the printer now. As I mentioned earlier, the glass bed is going to sit on the cantilevered Z-axis here, but we're going to thread those two cantilevered rods into the gap in between the glass plate and the metal subplate here. And then there are these little keyholes, and there are screws on the bottom of here that will loosen, and they'll slide through the keyholes and we'll secure them to the bed. Okay, so with the wires facing into the machine, we're going to slide these two cantilevered Z rods through that gap there. You may need to kind of shimmy it up and down a little bit. There we go. And then in the bottom here, we're going to align the screws with the larger part of the keyhole there, and we should be able to unscrew them until they pop through. And then once they're through, we want to slide that back to lock them into the skinnier part of the keyhole and then tighten them up. While you're tightening them up, you might want to apply gentle pressure backwards on the bed so it doesn't slide forwards on you. Okay, so with the bed secure, next we will attach the thermistor and the heated bed power wires. The thermistor is this little small JST connector here, and it's keyed so it only goes in one way. Not that it matters because the thermistor actually has no polarity. And then same with the heated bed. It doesn't matter which way it's connected. And then just screw down the terminal block. Okay. And that just kind of dangles there like that. Before we go too much further, I want to remove a couple of the retaining clips that the unit is shipped with to keep the X and Y axes stationary in transit. So there are these little press-fit 3D printed retaining clips that are on the rods for the X and Y. There's 2 of them. Make sure you remove these before you power up the printer. I'm going to do it now so we don't forget to do that later. If you leave them on, you're going to hear a lot of grinding and horrible noises when you try to move the X and Y axis around. So at this point, let's turn the printer around and we're going to attach the extruder mechanisms to the back. So as I mentioned, there are 2 threaded rods that will act as the filament spool holders, and we'll attach them into these nuts that are welded onto the back panel. So on the back here, we have the 2 ends of the Bowden tube that are going to go into the extruders. They're wrapped in kind of a cellophane wrapping. Sometimes you have to cut this off. It doesn't come off so nicely. Just be very careful. Again, we have wires and Bowden tubes here that we don't want to nick. There. And the extruders are going to mount on these posts here, these threaded posts. And there is a left and a right extruder. So we want to make sure that the threaded opening for the coupler here that's attached to the Bowden tube is facing up. So obviously this one is going to go on this side like this. They also happen to be numbered. So there's a number 2, since we have 2 extruders. There's a 2 on this side and a 1 on this side. So if you're facing the front of the printer, nozzle 1 is on your left, nozzle 2 is on your right, just like reading left to right. But since we're kind of on the back and reversed, 2 and 1, let's match up those numbers just to be sure. 2, and of course, as I mentioned, the threaded opening is facing up. So the nuts for this are in the bag with all the other small components. So slide that guy over the 2 screws there, or bolts. And then these are nylon kind of lock nuts. And then we'll use our trusty socket. Perfect. And then while we're here, we'll connect the filament runout sensor and the stepper motor. And then we're going to repeat with extruder number 1, obviously facing the opposite direction. Okay. And let's connect filament runout sensor for this extruder and the motor. Then we'll take the Bowden couplers, make sure we don't cross them. So this should be that side. And thread them in, and we'll use the included wrench to tighten them down. They have a little bit of like a, looks like a Teflon sealant on the threads. So a quick correction, when I pulled the filament out, I said it was 2.85. The filament that they ship with the machine is actually slightly less common 3mm filament. So just keep that in mind if you're using that filament in your slicing settings, that you want to set it to 3mm instead of 2.85. It is nice to have 2.85 or a thicker filament like that, especially if you're trying to push through a long Bowden tube like this, a more flexible filament. Maybe it's a TPU or maybe even just a softer nylon. There's less chance of it kind of buckling on you because it is such a larger diameter. So you don't need to go too crazy tightening those couplers in. Just make sure that they're not going to wiggle themselves loose. And I'm just backing off these levers so that when we go to slide the filament through, it'll make our lives a little bit easier. I guess we can attach the spool holders now. Obviously, you can deck these out with some 3D printed components, or maybe you even want to add bearings or something to them. But the stock included spool holders will definitely do. Pro tip, make sure that the less threaded side of the rod, so you can see the threading is long on one side, short on the other. You want the long side facing in. The reason for that is the filament is going to be moving this direction, and that is a tightening direction as far as the knob is concerned. But because the thread actually ends, the knob can only tighten so far, and then it locks against the lack of thread. So you wouldn't run into a situation where the filament is spinning this way, tightening the nut on here, and eventually the nut moves in and compresses the spool into the back of the machine, kind of causing some binding. Those nuts are not going to move on you in this orientation. Okay, so we are set from the back. We obviously also have the power connector right on the back. And if you're facing the front of the machine, on the right-hand side, you have your USB port. On the front, that's a USB port for a cable. On the front, we also have a USB port for a USB stick. So you don't have to worry about micro SD cards or adapters for those. Plug in any standard stick there. I believe they have to be FAT32 formatted, and typically I leave the sector size at 4096. I don't know that there's any size limitation on that, but you shouldn't need a huge USB stick anyway. We may as well load the filament at this point, and I'm not going to use the 3mm filament they had because I already have some 2.85 open. Find the end here. So the filament is going to unwind this way, and we're going to cut this on a 45. And straighten it as much as possible. So we're feeding it straight up through the bottom of the extruder mechanism here. And if you're looking from this angle, you can actually see the filament path and where it needs to go. And if you get caught on something, just kind of twist it a little bit. There. And now we're inside the Bowden tube. And slide this until it doesn't slide any further. And you'll want to heat up the nozzle to operating temperature, lower the bed, and you should be able to actually feed this right through to the point where you see it extruding out of the nozzle. Once it's at the end there, we won't go any further. There we go. Tighten down the screw to put pressure on the lever here. Great. And then we could do the same with nozzle 2 if we had another color or material we wanted to feed in there. Feed it in until it's coming out the hot end, if the hot end's up to temperature, and then tighten this screw to put pressure on the filament. A quick note, if you're removing the filament, there is an unload option in the LCD menu. You should use that. That quickly retracts the filament out of the nozzle to a couple inches above the hot end assembly. And then you can release the tension on the lever here and remove the rest by hand. But you want to make sure you're using that unload. It quickly pulls it out so you don't end up with a clog with a little blob at the end of the filament. Okay, so I've plugged in the printer. Let's just turn it on. And we're just going to move the Z down, which means increasing the Z, because we're increasing the distance from the nozzle tips to the build surface here. So if we go to move axis, and we can choose our increment on the right-hand side. So right now I'm in 10mm increments. And if I hit Z+, it should go down 1 centimeter or 10mm at a time. You can also choose 100. I just want to make some space for my hands here. So we've confirmed that the Z moves down, and if you remember from earlier, we removed these retaining clips for the X and Y axes that were attached to the rods in here. If you haven't removed the 2 of those, make sure you do so. And now we're going to home the machine in the X and Y. Move axis, we can home X. Okay, and let's home Y. And then let's home Z. Before we home Z, let's make sure that we have enough clearance. So we don't want the nozzle to ram into the glass bed here. So we're going to tighten each of these 4 corners all the way to the point where you see the silicone heater on the bottom nearly come into contact with the top ridge of this underplate. Now you'll notice I put my finger on the power button just in case for some reason it still came into contact with the bed. I could kill the power rather than allowing it to continue to smash in there. And hopefully you can see that there. We have probably a good 3mm or so of clearance between the glass bed and the nozzle tips. And that's perfect because in my case, I'm going to be putting a glass plate on top of it. The reason I do this is certain materials are really aggressive as far as how they bond to the bed surface, and I've, when removing pieces, pulled out chunks of the glass. I really don't want to do that with the stock glass surface, though it shouldn't happen, it is borosilicate. The fact that if it does happen, that's a costly repair. The heater element is actually bonded to the glass surface and could also get damaged if the glass shattered or something. So I'm bonding to this glass plate. That is kind of a throwaway item if something does happen to it. And since we've tightened those screws all the way, this easily slides in with more than enough room to spare. Now the build surface area is right up to the screws that are holding the glass plate, the stock borosilicate, onto this undercarriage. The screw ends right there. So I'm gonna align the glass plate with those screws and the sides, and then just use standard binder clips. The really small ones, that is. And we're gonna clip it in the sides here. You may have your own preference. If you want to print onto the stock build surface, I'd suggest you use something to both promote adhesion, but also kind of act as a release agent. So some materials, like a Tallman nylon, would suggest you use a diluted PVA glue with a certain ratio of water and glue. You could also use something like an Elmer's Extreme glue stick, or other people will attach a adhesive-based build surface like a build tack or PEI or something like that to the stock bed. Again, to kind of both give them really good adhesion, but also make the parts easier to release and protect your glass bed surface. So now that we've done that, we need to raise the Z so that it's the proper distance away from the nozzles. Right now the nozzles would be printing in midair, so let's go through that routine now. So we decided to take the time and pull the protective sheets off the acrylic panels here to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like when it's fully unpacked. And in doing so, it took a little while. The printer turned itself off. So if that happens to you, don't be alarmed, nothing's wrong. It's just got a power saving measure, so we hadn't used it for 10 minutes or so and it powered itself down. So I hit the power button again, it's back on. We've already made sure that we have enough Z clearance so the bed's not going to smash into the nozzle. So we can go ahead and home all axes. Since we're doing a bed leveling, we're also going to want to do it at temperature, ideally, just because things do expand as they heat up. So we're going to use the preheat option here. So back at the main menu, choose preheat, and that will preheat nozzle 1 to 210 by default and the bed to 45. Being a 24-volt system, this isn't going to take a whole lot of time. You can also adjust your preheat settings. If you want your bed to be 60, you can do that. And we'll have to wait until that's up to temperature, and we're going to use the standard paper routine as far as leveling the nozzle. Leveling the bed. So the paper routine, we're going to go corner to corner, probably 2 times around if everything looks good, and just make sure that there's a little bit of drag on the paper. It should almost sound like sandpaper between the bed and the nozzle tip, and then adjust the screw as necessary to get to that distance, and then we'll move the nozzle to the back corner and kind of go in a clockwise fashion. Let's just check under status. We can see the temperature, 185 on the nozzle and 40 on the bed. So just a couple more seconds. All right, everything's up to temperature. Now we can start with the leveling routine. A quick note, if you're moving the hot end around and you hear any kind of grinding or kind of skipping sounds, just stop what you're doing and double check that your X rod is perfectly kind of, it's not skewed. Make sure that it's an equal distance from either side so it's not kind of cockeyed, and likewise with the Y. So you want them to both be perpendicular to each other, and you can measure from a point of reference like the frame to the rod, and then from the frame to the rod, and that should be very, very close to the same distance, because it can bind if it's not perfectly squared. But we don't have that problem, so let's move the nozzle in a little bit. I'm going to move it 10 millimeters, maybe 20 there. And as you can see, we've got lots of space here. So I'm going to loosen the nut on the bottom here until, hopefully you can hear that, there's a little bit of drag between the paper and the bed. And then we're going to move it to the back corner. So let's just choose 100, let's say. Speed this along. Great. So we are very, very close here. There we go. Perfect. And just so that we're not scraping when I move across, I'm gonna just tighten these two corners a little bit more. I'm almost like completely tight there as far as it'll go down. We'll move the the X 100 at a time. And then check over there. Okay. And then move it to the front. Avoiding the binder clips in the process ideally. So let's move it 10 millimeters in. I'll have to fix that binder clip. Okay, and like I said earlier on, we're going to do a second pass just because as we're changing one corner, we're affecting the others as well. There we go. So at this point, I would be ready to start printing. So that's how you would unpack, assemble, and level your brand new Creatbot DX. Hopefully you found that useful. If you're watching this on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment down below. Let us know what else you'd like to know about the Creatbot DX or any of the other products we've shown you on our channel. Thanks for watching.